Hey, my name is Mike Usrey and welcome to FM Live. Today we're going to be talking about what kind of maintenance and adjustments or other things should you be aware about when taking care of your power retractable hardtop or your retractable fastback. Both of these cars, as far as the operating mechanisms for their tops are concerned, are similar but not quite the same. So I'll talk about some of both of the applicable movements and gears and moving parts on these cars, mostly on the PRHT today, but a lot of it will apply to the RF as well. So I will say that before we get started though, if you have any comments or questions about how to maintain all of the mechanisms, moving parts, and bits of a PRHT or RF, I'll talk about them in the video, but of course put your comments and questions down below, so that way if I don't specifically cover them, I can answer those questions as we're going through the video. Also, of course, we're going to be filming in a vertical format today. If you don't like that, just hang out on our YouTube channel the next day or two. We'll have the 4K widescreen available for your viewing pleasure. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about PRHT maintenance. Basically, when I'm talking about maintenance, what I'm referring to is that these tops have a lot of moving parts. They have hinges, they have gears, they have cables, they have all kinds of things that move around, which over time, especially if you actually drive the car, it gets dirty. Stuff may get wiggled loose with vibrations from going down washboard drive surfaces, all kinds of things that either is going to make it dirty enough to the point where it doesn't operate very well. It could make it to the point where stuff actually comes out of alignment and doesn't operate very well. Or quite simply, it might be noisy and you might want to take care of that by cleaning and lubricating these parts. So I'm going to talk about how you can do those things, hopefully dispel a few kind of, not myths per se, but just unknowns about how to take care of your PRHT. There's a lot of questions about what to do when something happens, but there's not a lot of information out there. So hopefully we'll talk about most of those in this video. To get started, at least here in North America, a PRHT, this happened in 2007 up through 15, so it's a third generation car. And then of course for the RFs, we're going to start with 2017, again in North America, up till current, which is 2025 at the moment. So the soft top cars, I'm not going to talk about a whole bunch. There's a few things that are applicable, but I'm mostly going to be covering the stuff pertinent to moving hardtop cars. So, for the most part, let's actually, I'm going to talk about this sail panel since it's up and about. This guy is, of course, made of multiple pieces. Whenever you press the button to activate your PRHT to go ahead and put the top down or put it up, the first thing that moves is the sail panel. And this guy, basically all it's doing is it's uncovering a big cavity back here behind your seats, where when the top folds down, this is its hiding spot. There's quite a bit of room in there, and on this side I've left all the plastics in place. On that side I've removed some of the plastics just to make it easier to see what's going on. But basically the sail panel is a very simple kind of mechanical piece. We have a couple of arms here, and then basically there's mounting fixtures on the bottom and a mounting plate on the top. But essentially you can think of it as a moving parallelogram. These two arms, they basically move relative to each other as that sail panel goes up and down. So they've got hinges on the bottom and hinges on the top. There's also, maybe I'll show you on this side so that way you can see a little bit better on the camera. There's also a gear, let me stand out of the light here. There's also a big gear that you can kind of see the teeth of here. And if I shine my light, there we go. That might be a little easier to see what's going on. This big gear right here is one of the mechanisms, or basically the driven gear, for how this piece goes up and down. And then on the inside, if you can see on this side maybe, there's a big electrical connector, and we have a motor, and underneath right here, this point, is the drive gear. So this motor is spinning a gear that is then turning this big gear, and there's a slider pin. If I can get my hand over here, I'll point to it. There we go. There's a slider pin that has a groove that moves in this forward arm. And basically by turning this driven gear, it's moving this slider, which then forces the arms to move and pushes the sail panel up out of the way. So for a mechanical bit of moving gear here, it's actually pretty simple. You know, there's very few parts that actually make this work. There's not any magic or anything we have to really worry about in this setup. Mostly though, when I hear about folks asking about, hey, my top makes funny noises, it makes this weird crunchy noise or, you know, kind of pop, 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 pop noise when it's going up or down, usually it's because of misalignment of these gears. So what'll happen over time is that, you know, especially if you live down a really bumpy road or something like that, this piece of the metal bracket and this piece of the metal bracket will start to separate from each other. There is a bolt here, you can see the shiny guy. It's got an Allen, a 4mm Allen in it, that this will start to loosen up, and then these two pieces of metal can basically separate from each other. What happens when that actually separates is that the motor, which is attached to this plate, and the gear, which is attached to more or less this plate, start to basically come out of mesh. So those gear teeth start to separate as well when these brackets are starting to move apart. When that happens, your gear teeth aren't contacting each other quite as much as they should, and so you'll get noise, and if it's far enough apart, they'll actually slip past and they'll, you know, smack the next tooth in line. Makes a lot of noise. Your top may or may not even go up or down all the way. So if you have that kind of noise where like this sail panel is really juddery, it's making a ton of noise, it sounds like it's breaking or crunching, check and see if these Allen screws are tight. Because if you have any gap between these two pieces of metal, that's probably the most likely cause. Another thing that can also happen over time, I think even maybe more with the NC1s or earlier cars, is that you might just be able to see there's kind of these ends of bolts that are poking through this bracket right here. And you might even be able to tell that there's a little bit of kind of an orange color to them. On this car, this is a 13, it's NC3, these have orange Loctite or some kind of locking compound on them that helps keep them in place. I think that Mazda figured that out along the way. I haven't confirmed it on an early car, but my suspicion is that especially if you have an NC1 or, you know, 2007 earlier car, that these bolts may not have any locking compound on them. And if these back out, the heads of them are on this side, basically underneath the motor, you can get that same kind of misalignment where you're not getting good mesh between the gear here off of the motor and this gear here that actually moves the legs of the top. So if you don't see these guys flush with this black metal surface, that's another problem. Basically, this motor has to come off. There's some screws and such that holds it in place. Basically, you'll have to take off the sail panel, take off this bracket to be able to access the motors and get to the backside. It's a little bit of a hassle, not too bad. But basically, this motor has to come off so you can get to the backside of the heads on this side, retighten them down. I would recommend using at least blue Loctite. You probably don't need to go with red Loctite, but just something to keep them from being able to loosen out over time. So this is also the mechanism that you've probably heard if you have ever had an issue where maybe the car is dead and you don't have any power that you can actually move the top. If it gets stuck up or stuck down, you can manually operate the top by disengaging those two plates with that little shiny bolt I was showing you earlier. And you may even have a little baggie with some, I think it's like white nylon or something like that, rope, little string, and then this goofy long, looks like a tent stake, but it's a bolt with an eyelet at the end of it. So that is a manual tool, adjustment tool, really kind of just to disengage this mechanism on the sail panel. Because right now, I can't move this physically. I mean, not without breaking it. It's something that right now, because the motor is holding it in place, the teeth are engaged, this is kind of locked. But if you needed to get this up or down, there is that toolkit that you may or may not have in your trunk still, where basically that long screw, let me see if I can, you might have to get over here at this angle to show that extra hole. Basically, there's another threaded hole just above that screw that holds in place. Basically, think of this as the locking screw, but see this one, the threads are actually in the outermost piece. So if you take this screw out and then you use that long adjustment bolt, or let's call it a unlocking tool. If you use that, it'll start threading into this and pushing this piece away from this back piece. And again, that's just manually disengaging the gears. So at which point, this can all turn freely and you can move this by hand. Mazda actually specifies that you shouldn't really just grab and pull on this when you do that. You should actually tie onto parts of this leg, and then you come behind the car on both sides, and you basically take those strings after they're tied and you pull it this way. So that way you're pulling back the sail panel evenly left to right. So you'd want to loosen and do each side first before you try to pull it up. Basically, it's a big, long procedure that hopefully you'll never have to do. For this car, if you ever have an issue where the top is stuck partly up, partly down, and you can't get it closed, and you need to drive the car somewhere to store it before you can actually fix whatever the problem is, it's kind of a last-ditch attempt to just manually get it closed or manually get it all the way open so you can drive the car back to where you can work on it. That's really all it's for. Out of all of the folks that I've talked to, unless they were the original owners, and that was only a sometime, I've actually never talked to anybody who still has the factory string and eye bolts. I think that most people take them out of their trunk because they're like, what's that? And, you know, and it goes in the garage, and then the car gets sold and nobody ever sees those tools again. So the bolt itself, it's something that I've tried to reach it whenever I've had the top up, and to be able to get back here with the sail panel actually closed is super, super difficult. So if you think that this is something that you might need the service, I would recommend that you either jump on eBay and grab yourself one of those, or if it's functioning right now, hopefully you can just follow along with what we're talking about to actually take care of this and make sure that those two pieces are definitely clamped together, so that way the gears are in constant mesh and they're not jumping back and forth or skipping teeth as they go past. I think for the most part, that's pretty much it on these guys. Let's talk about the mechanisms that are now in kind of this intermediate panel and this top panel, because they're also interesting, but also a lot more complicated with their bends and whatnot. So maybe if you duck into the cabin on this side, and I'll kind of go from the driver's side over here, because we'll actually be looking inside the car. So inside the car, let's see if I can find somewhere metal to hang this. It's not very good. Inside the car here, there are lots of hinged legs or arms, whatever you want to call them, appendages, where they're basically allowing the top to move all as one motion, but it will move and change the angle of the top piece and the intermediate piece, and even the glass as well, in kind of an orchestrated effort to get everything to origami into this little trunk cavity back here. Pro tip, if you need some access back here on the passenger side of your car, you actually can take off a little panel. It just pops out of place, and then you can reach back here and get to some of the mechanisms on the back if you need to. But I've also taken apart some of the plastics over here, so that way you can see some of the inner workings of the PRHT. You don't necessarily have to go this far just to clean and service, but I'm kind of showing you this so that way you have a better understanding. The top itself is, let me get this out of the way. The top itself is actually moved by a couple of motors on either side, where they live right here, just inside of the door jamb. And these motors have big old gears on the outside, which we'll look at a little bit closely, or more closely in just a second, that they actually pull on and twist a lot of the mechanisms that then move these arms and these pivot joints. Actually, since we're here, let's watch it in action, shall we? Okay, so I'm going to start this up and just finish moving the top here. There we go. And you can see as everything moves, all the arms, the pivot points. But it's all controlled by just this motor on this side, this motor on this side for the main top portions. And then you have the 2 individual motors that control the sail panel in its movement. So those 4 motors are basically all synchronized, come on and turn off at different times to be able to move and operate the top. Pretty clever, considering that if you look at some of the older, like retractable hardtop cars of ye olden days, that they would have a motor or 2 for each individual panel, and basically they'd be commanding one motor to just open this bit, one motor to then tilt this bit, one motor to then push it down, or whatever, move it, and then like you'd have 6 or 7 motors to move everything just to put a top down. When on these cars, in RFs as well, you only have really 4 motors to worry about that are moving stuff, and they're just 2 that are paired together, really. So a simplified electrical system, but more complex on the hinges and operation of how everything folds down. So I'll come over here on this side, and just to show you, now that the top is down, we're going to see this motor that's on this side. It does have some gears that are kind of down in here, and it's difficult to see on the PRHTs. We'll go look at the RFs in just a second. But this plastic cover here is actually covering some gears that you may or may not be able to see at that angle. You can kind of just barely see some of the teeth poking out underside of this plastic bit. Hopefully that's showing up on the camera. I apologize if it's not. Even in person, it's really difficult to see. But basically, you've got 2 big burly gears that all they're doing is just kind of I don't know if it's even quite 90 degrees worth of motion, but it's just these big burly gears. They kind of look like a driven gear set on like a big block Chevy with a huge supercharger on it, where the big pulleys have those big splined teeth on them, kind of thing. It kind of looks like that, but a miniaturized version in a Miata. But these guys are the gears here that move all of that. Everything else you can think of is just a hinge, and it's just moving and keeping things in line. To show you better what this looks like, or kind of what I'm talking about here, let's actually step over here to the RF, where I can show you, because on the RFs, you have your Flyin buttress that comes up, moves out of the way, and it takes a lot of other stuff with it that the PRHT is kind of still part of the car and hiding. So on the RFs, you can actually see, here's these big tooth gears I was telling you about earlier. These look similar, not quite the same as the NCs, but basically you can see this is the drive gear that's attached to the motor, and this is the driven gear, and they really only rotate 90 degrees or so. They're not actually swinging that much of rotation, but that movement with all of these linkages that actually on the RF you can kind of see even better, where you have so many different hinge points that Mazda is cleverly designed to be able to allow all of the different pieces to move separately from each other and origami themselves nice and tight behind the seats. And this also allows you to keep all of your trunk space. So compared to soft tops, RFs and PRHTs have the same trunk space, if you didn't know. So really nice, tidy kind of usage of space and mechanical linkages and movements to make all that happen. So, talked about how it works a little bit, talked about a couple of issues that you might have with how, maybe the top needs some maintenance. So let's go ahead and talk about what things, maybe your top isn't broken necessarily, but maybe you want to go ahead and clean it up and get everything serviced so that way it's in kind of better shape, you can sleep better at night, things work smoothly, doesn't make a ton of noise, that kind of stuff. On the PRHT, I've actually already done the driver's side. I will say that if you're doing this on your PRHT, the driver's side is actually a little bit more obnoxious to get to everything. Some of the bits down there to reach and access them are a bit fiddly. So we're going to show you on the passenger side, but it's mostly the same. There's just a few extra components on this side that I'm not going to show you how to disassemble all of it. But to do that, what I'm going to do is start by opening up the top and just open up the sail panel again. And if I press the button, I can just press the open button right there and it'll stop. It will beep and complain. It's okay. You can turn the key off if you don't want to hear it, but it'll stop in about 10 seconds. But now, over here, what I'm going to do is I've got some lubricant. This is PB Blaster white lithium grease. You can use whatever brand flavor of white lithium grease that you like. There are other types of grease that also work well. I prefer white lithium just because it's a little bit, it's got a little bit more sticky kind of action to it, and it's also coming in a spray can like this, makes it super easy to apply. So I recommend that you get something that's got a spray nozzle attachment to it like this. And mostly the reason being is that when you get in here, this gear is okay to get to. It's not too bad, but especially on this side, it is really a pain to get into some of the gears. So before you start, if your gears are at all crusty, like actually this side's not too bad. I got a little bit of fuzz and fluff from dogs or cats or something like that. But otherwise, like the gears look okay. You can see that I've got a little bit of grease still on it. So these ones actually are probably okay. I haven't had any noise or concerns on this particular top, so I'm not really too worried about going crazy. But you can wipe this down so that way any crud or dust or whatever leftover like dried grease from the factory is removed if you need to. So from here, what I like to do though is just get my spray lube. And another good thing I like about the PB Blaster is that you can actually set how much spray. So I'm going to turn this all the way down because otherwise you can just absolutely blast and make a mess of everything back here. But right here on this, basically, I'm just going to kind of apply a little bit. Come on. Sure. There we go. Apply just a little bit of this lube. There we go. On the teeth of the gears. And you don't need a whole bunch because it will spread when you actuate the top and go up and down. I think I made it angry. Oh, I didn't have it clicked fully into place. There we go. So you can see just like a little bit all along the teeth. I'm going to get a little bit on top of the drive gear here. Not a whole bunch. So basically, just giving it a little bit of lube. And on this one, I've already confirmed that this Allen bolt is tight, so I don't need to worry about it. Everything is meshing properly. And now when I operate the top, this white lithium grease is going to be squished throughout all of the gears, kind of dispersed. And if you need to, once you've worked it, operated the top a few times, go back with a rag. If there's any leftover, any residue that's kind of squished off to the side, just wipe it up. No big deal. The other one that I would use the white lithium lube on are these big gears, which now actually the top is down. You can kind of see the side of it a little bit better. So this plastic cover, you can technically take it off. You have to take off basically all of the plastics and get behind there. It's a huge pain. I actually managed to strip out the little screw on the other side, getting access to it before this video to see what it took to get to it. And this screw is actually held on with that orange Loctite again. I don't know why. It's an M5 screw. I don't know why Mazda thought that it was required, but if you decide to go that far, just know that little screw will fight you if you can see orange Loctite on the back of it. But basically on this one actually I am going to clean a little bit more because see, there is some leftover grease basically that's kind of dried and crusty from the factory. So on this one, I'm going to grab a rag and I'm going to try to wipe out as much of that as possible. It doesn't look super crusty otherwise, like not a whole bunch of dirt in there. So really I'm just going to get those big crusty bits out of the way, and then I'm going to throw some lube on and we should be good to go. So let me grab a rag. Okay. Actually, I'm going to grab, got a little pick here as well. There we go. Old grease boogers. And this stuff it's not super dry and crusty. It's still doing a job of keeping the gears lubricated at least a little bit, but it's definitely not in its prime anymore. So cleaning it out and giving it a new birthday is not a terrible idea. Basically, I'm going to clean up as much as I can see from this end. Once the top is up, we'll also be able to see a little bit more gears as well as it rotates. But from there, I'm going to go with a little bit of this white lithium spray lube. Again, having this little nozzle on here is going to make this much easier. If I can hold it correctly. There we go. Okay, and that's about as much as I can see from the top, but that is enough for right now. And there it is. Wipe off a little bit that I got a little overzealous with. But basically, that's all we need to do with the gears. Make sure that they're clean, add a little bit of lube. You can even use regular chassis grease if that's all you have. It's okay. I like this because it's a little bit lighter weight and you can spray it. It's easier to apply, but these gears are not going to be terribly picky. So now that I've applied that lubricant, let's actuate the top here. And basically give these gears a chance to spread that lubricant all over the other teeth that I couldn't quite reach. All right. Okay, so now I can see a few more teeth now that the top is up. Again, very difficult to see on camera, I'm sorry. But now that I can see some of these other teeth that are exposed, I'm also going to give them a little shot of grease as well. And I'm probably going to stick my arm right in the middle of where the camera's looking, so my apologies here. This is definitely a bit awkward to reach, even without a camera. Whoa, hey. There we go. Yep, so that happens. Wouldn't be a video with me hosting if I didn't make a mess, I suppose. All right, so yeah, I've definitely made a bit of a mess. Hopefully when you're doing this, you're not also filming it, so you can do a little bit better job of paying attention to what you're doing. But I'm just going to clean up the spots that I oversprayed, and then that's pretty much it for the gears. Now, for the linkages, those, you can use the white lithium as well, but I find that they're a little bit more difficult to get into because the gaps between the hinges, you know, the inside outside of them, is a little bit tighter to get to. Let me grab another rag real quick. And basically because of that, you're definitely going to make a mess. I recommend that you have a rag on handy to basically catch all the backsplash from the hinges. And to make your life easier to see what I'm doing, I'm actually going to do it on the sail panel rather than on the inside just now. So maybe, Logan, you can kind of come from underneath here. And we're going to look at these guys. So these hinges here, there we go. These hinges here, they're of course pressed together kind of a rivet style hinge. So you can't really access them to take them apart and then clean and lubricate them. So if you need to, you can spray a little bit of like brake clean through there if they're super yucky and try to wash stuff out. If you do that, make sure that you go back and lubricate, because you definitely don't want them to just be totally dry. But another useful application of this little nozzle here is that you can kind of get between them and give it a little bit of a squeeze there. And see, there's going to be a lot of mess when you do this, but hopefully you get a good amount of it between the metal, because that's where your hinge and moving parts are. So same thing over here on this side. I'm going to get a little bit there. I'm going to try to get a little bit here on the front side. There we go. Okay, and I'm not going to do all of them because there's a ton on the car. I'll do it after we're done filming, but essentially any of these joints here, these hinges that are on your sail panel, any of the joints and hinges that are here on the rest of the top itself, both here that you can see from the outside and also on the inside. Don't forget, there's actually like 6 or 7 of them on the inside on both sides that you'll also want to try to lubricate as well. It is a mess, so again, be prepared. But otherwise, all we're doing there is making sure that those are clean and that they're lubricated. And once you're done, top up, top down several times, so that way you can see that all of the grease has hopefully been distributed amongst all the gears, all of the hinge points, that kind of thing. While you're in here, another good point that you should plan on doing, that I'm sure the comments might already be asking about, is cleaning your drains. So on a PRHT and on an RF, there are actually more complicated drain mechanisms than the soft tops. With soft tops, you have a rain rail that goes around the whole backside of the canvas material, and basically that rain rail just acts as a gutter, essentially. And all of the water, even if it comes, right here in the middle, it all separates, goes down to the corners right behind where the windows and doors are, and it drains down into a little bucket of sorts, and then down underneath the car through a tube. So they're pretty simple. RFs and PRHTs are the same kind of thought, but there's more passageways, more tubes and tunnels to worry about. On this side, as I mentioned, I've removed some of the plastic so you can see kind of what's going on. And also I've made myself a nice little access here so that way I can point my hand and you can still see without my head being in the way. But down here, this is the little drain where everything needs to be headed to, and oftentimes it'll be full of junk. This one's actually not too terrible. Fortunately, this car doesn't get parked underneath a tree or anything that's dropping a ton of leaves and debris, so it's not awful, but obviously you can see there's some little leaves and some trash. I don't know, looks like maybe old gum or something, I'm not sure. But that kind of stuff, if there's enough debris there that it builds up, you can actually have the drain clogged inside the car, and then you're going to have a puddle inside your car. Not going to be great. It's going to smell bad if you leave it long enough. And obviously it's going to make probably your carpet and other parts of the interior of the car wet if it sloshes out. So make sure that any debris gets cleaned out of there. Also, to kind of trail backwards a little bit, you can kind of see right here, I hope, there's this little hose right here. And this guy is part of the drain system for your rear window. And there is actually a hose that goes from here up behind this plastic and then up into kind of the inner workings of the top. Actually, you can kind of see it from this side, Logan, if you want to step over here. And I'll shine a light for you. So, here we go. So this guy, this hose back here, it drains from the underside of your glass piece, and then that hose actually goes down behind the plastic and snakes down to that other drain. So that's one of them. There's also a drain that's part of your rubber on the outside here that drains forward and then there's kind of a little funnel on that side. So there's a secondary one, and that all happens before the drain here in the parcel shelf, before it even gets underneath the car. So all of these places can collect debris, get clogged up, and then overflow if you don't keep them clean. So going through, checking to make sure there's not a bunch of crud inside your weather stripping, and especially like where the drains are, specifically here. So this water is going to come through, and it's actually going to drain right here to make sure that there's not a bunch of yuck up in there. Same thing, if you follow this forward, there's actually, you can kind of see the little drain hole right there. If that's all clogged up, then you're not going to have a good drain there. If you're careful and you use low pressure air from like a air compressor with a little nozzle, you can sometimes just blast it out and even kind of stick it down in there. Just low pressure, you don't want to go crazy, but if there's any just dirt, debris that's in the tube, you can usually blow it out that way. If you need to, you can take the plastic out and get to this hose and actually remove the hose altogether and clean it out. If you have one of the famed tools to clean out these kinds of drains are trombone cleaners. So basically they're long, flexible kind of pipe cleaner tools that if you have a band student that plays a brass instrument, they probably have one. You might not want to use theirs unless they don't mind about it being yucky. I actually oftentimes, thank you Logan, will use just a bit of welding rod, and I'll kind of bend the tip over so that way it's not pointy and super sharp. But basically something that you can manipulate, and you can kind of use it to poke down in those little holes and chase any debris out if you need to. From the top here on the PRHTs, you can't really access the top of the drain that's down inside the car, because like you can see on this one, it does have a kind of a lattice mesh covering it, and that's good to keep out like the big stuff. So it's difficult to be able to actually get a cleaner down in there. If you have something that's like a welding rod, as long as it's a small enough diameter, you can kind of get it down through the lattice work and get it to go down into your drain. This is tricky because the drain isn't straight, so you kind of have to do a little bit of a wiggle, a little bit of a waggle, move it around, and get it, you know, as far down there as you can, but it is difficult. Really, the best way is actually removing that plastic piece altogether, which does require you remove more bits of the interior to get to it in order to be able to actually clean it from the bottom. So, I'm sorry, clean it from the top. However, once you've done that, basically you'll still want to clean it out from the bottom as well. And I'll show you why. Let me get the car up in the air so that way we can see the underside, and I'll show you why it's important that you still need to be able to get to the bottom of those drains in order to get them cleared out properly. Okay, so now that we've got it up in the air, I recommend that one, you get your cleaner tool, get your flashlight, and get a trash can. Also, oh, I left it up in the car. I'm going to get another one. I also like to use a small flat blade screwdriver or a little pick. You'll want something that's just a short little piece that you can pry with. And that's because on these cars, There we go. Hopefully you can see what's going on there. So this little guy, this plastic oval piece, this is actually the drain from the top on both sides. So you've got one here on this side, same thing on the other side. This side, the left side of the car, is a little bit easier to see just because the other side you've got a charcoal canister that's kind of right in the way of everything. But up inside here, it's probably difficult to pick up on camera, but there is a black flappy door. Actually, I don't know if that's any better for you. But this little flappy door, basically you'll need some kind of a prying tool to be able to flip it up. And once you do, yep, there'll be a bunch of yuck that probably comes out, just like that. But I like to use some kind of a tool like this to basically hold the flappy door open with one hand. And then I'll use my welding wire or my trombone brush cleaning tool and use that to poke it up from the underside and let it knock down any more junk that has accumulated that fell down whenever you're cleaning stuff up from the top. So you don't want to use something that is stiff. You definitely want something that's a bit malleable and can move around. Because that is not a straight shot up to the top, it does have a little bit of a curvature to it. So you may need to do a little bit of finagling with your tool to get it to where it actually goes up as far as you can reach. There we go. So do a little bit of a wiggling and finagling. If there's anything that's trapped up there, usually it's going to be leaves or even, like I found, wads of hair and other gross stuff that basically it clogs up. So you kind of need to encourage it to come down. There we go. And you can see that this one wasn't terrible, but it definitely wasn't clean. So hopefully now you won't have any blockages that are keeping water from draining underneath the car and making your car smell musty, getting your carpet all wet, that kind of stuff. But that side is basically how you do it. And just to show you what it looks like on the PRHTs, I've already moved the charcoal canister a bit out of the way, but it's the same kind of thing, just a little bit more difficult access because this has 3 bolt attachment points, and then you can just kind of slide it off to the side just enough to get over there. RFs are very much similar kind of setups. They don't look identical to this, but it's the same kind of thing. You get underneath the car and you'll find little cavities with little flappies, and you'll do the same process to clean them out. Pretty easy peasy. So, before I continue yammering, oh, okay. Can you hear it now? Testing, testing.
It's gonna die again.
Sorry folks, we're having some technical difficulties. Are we just running raw now? Okay. All right, sorry about that. Apparently my microphone is running out of juice. That's what happens when you talk too much. But basically being able to see the drain here on the RFs is difficult. You can actually access that without taking out too much plastic, but to be able to remove this plastic tray back here, it's also not a terrible thing to do. Basically, you're going to have a few clips like this one. So you can, I don't know if you can see it from that angle. Let me see. Oh, here. I can point to this one. That's probably easier for you to see. This is easier to see in person than it is to film, but basically you've got some of these plastic clips where you take out the centerpiece, and then it's just a little pop rivet that comes out. I'll probably even take this one out by hand. Yep. So like this guy. There's a few of these that hold on the perimeter of the plastic, and then once you pop those out, this plastic tray can be removed, and that'll get you easier access down there to the drain itself. So that way, if there are any debris, leaves, cat hair, whatever, you can clean it out. Make sure that you're not getting puddles of water there that are trapped. Besides that though, same process for cleaning up the gears, cleaning up any of the hinge mechanisms using the lithium grease or something similar that you can actually get in between all of the moving parts, get them nice and lubricated. Probably on an RF, unless you've just really, really driven the crap out of it, it's probably not quite old or dirty enough to be able to need that much effort just yet, but the process is much the same. So if you're watching this 10 years in the future, same thing, just clean it up, lube it up. I will mention that the mechanism for being able to disengage the gears on an RF is different from an NC PRHT. You can notice that the metal here is different. It's a much thinner profile, but it's kind of the same kind of thing where basically the motor is attached to this piece of metal. You can see there's a bolt here attaching the outside piece of metal to the inside. So you take that bolt out of place, and basically you can then manipulate it to where the gear, the drive gear, is not contacting the driven gear, and then this can be manually operated. Maybe Travis can confirm if he has the original string and kit. He does.
I've got the kit, but never had to use it.
Oh, so Travis, the owner of this car, he has the string and special tool kit that I was talking about for the PRHTs. There's a similar one for NDRFs. He's never had to use it, fortunately, but there is another special tool basically to be able to help disengage the piece of metal to do that. If you maintain everything properly, hopefully you'll never have to worry about that. The other thing that maybe I'll just touch on briefly, because it probably doesn't affect many people, but it might affect some, is that on both of these cars there are limit switches. So you can see that there's this little kind of teal guy with a little metal clip. When the top goes down, there's actually a bit on the buttress, that's right, the buttress, that will contact this limit switch. So that way it knows that it is fully down. There's limit switches for it going up and going down. There's other limit switches in the system, actually more right here. There's another one in the hinge. But these mechanisms let the controller know when the top has reached its end of movement, either closing or opening. So these switches, they are simple. If the little tabs get bent, if they get broken, if one day they wear out and you get an error notification on your dash about there being a top malfunction, it's also possible that it could be one of these limit switches. Luckily though, they are very simple momentary switches. So if you have to troubleshoot any of these guys, if you take them off or if you get access to the wires, there's just two wires, and basically you can take a multimeter and just tap into both wires at the connector and then press the switch. And when you press the switch, you should either have continuity or it should lose continuity. Basically it'll be on off one way or the other, but you should be able to press the switch to see if it's actually making contact and then losing contact when you move the switch. So they're very easy to diagnose as long as you can get access to the electrical end of them. Okay, I think, Travis, unless there's anything else that's popped up that I should talk about, that's probably about it. I will mention that for soft top cars, there aren't anywhere near as many bits and pieces and moving things, of course, because they're manual operated. They do have hinges that you can clean and lubricate similar to the PRHT and RFs, so you might consider that, but otherwise they're much simpler. There's not anywhere near as many motors and that kind of thing. Oh, one more thing. I actually forgot to mention this earlier because we focused on the passenger side, but on the driver's side, or left-hand side of RFs and PRHTs, if you can see, actually, I don't know if you can look through from the back there, Logan, there is a cable, and basically this has a run to kind of the middle of the car where there's essentially a motor, and it knows the position of the cable. This cable needs to be able to move freely. So if you see dirt and debris on this cable, definitely clean it off. It generally doesn't have issues because it's not really doing much. The motors are doing the bulk of the job as far as moving the top, so it's really just there to help the control module know that the top is moving like it thinks it is. But this guy, if it does have any issues with being dirty or being stuck, it is a simple cable, and it has a sleeve here. Clean it all up, and you can actually take it out of here if you need to, but you can get cable lube and put it on here and move the cable manually, you know, just actuate it. You can pull it out of its little home here on this gear. I might be able to do it here on this guy. Actually, I may not because it's in the way. But basically, you kind of undo it. You fish it out from behind here, and then you can move this cable manually, clean it off, add some cable lube, actuate it a few times, and then put it back in place. Pretty simple. It's not really a common issue, so you probably won't have to worry about it, but in case you're in there and you see that, go ahead and take a look at the cable, clean it off, and lube it as necessary. Okay, I think that is probably my spiel. So I hope that this was all helpful information for you. Hopefully you have a better understanding of how these cars work, how the tops operate, you know, what needs to be looked at, what things potentially could go wrong if they're not cleaned, or if hardware starts to become tightened from where it should be. It's loosened up and allowing things to move like they shouldn't be, that kind of stuff. But overall, they're pretty simple as far as the individual components. So don't get too focused on, wow, that's a complicated hinge assembly. It is, but they're simple moving pivot points. Think of them as individual components and just look at what is moving and what should be lubricated and cleaned. That's really all we're looking at here. It's pretty straightforward. If this is information that you found helpful, please give us a like, maybe subscribe, so that way next time we do another helpful how-to video, you can get some more information on your car that way too. Also, this is actually a video that we did because we got suggestions on topics that you wanted us to cover. So if there's something that you think you would like us to talk about in a future video similar to this, or maybe we talk about NAs or NBs, or you know, whatever else Miata related, let us know. We really appreciate your comments and your suggestions for what we can talk about in these videos. As always, we really appreciate your time. Hopefully you found this entertaining, if nothing else. And if you like this kind of stuff, you can also reach out to us directly to ask questions about tops or turbos or brakes or suspension or whatever. Give us a call, send us an email. We'd love to chat with you. But until next time, again, thanks for watching. We really appreciate it, and we will see you next week.